morning, everybody listening to us live and watching us live in Europe and UK. Good evening to everybody in Asia. And I guess good day to everybody watching this on demand at your own time later on. So we're gathered here for a very fascinating session about Asia's business cultures and how they really affect how you do business in that part of the world. Okay, there's a lot of misconceptions and myths flying around, and people tend to exaggerate the importance of certain things in terms of business culture. Others go overlooked. Other quite important things often go overlooked. We're not saying that understanding the local business cultures is not important. In fact, we're saying the opposite. You do need to understand these cultures of the countries that you're trying to enter and that you're trying to partner with. But very often, the things that you need to pay attention to are not the ones that you think. So we thought that we will bring a few experts from that part of the world, people who are based in our offices in Asia. So we have four incredible guest speakers today joining in their evening time. So hopefully happy to leave us today with some words of wisdom before they sign off. We're going to have Nare from our Korea office, Nicholas from our Japan office, Nicole from Singapore, and Sam from Taiwan. Between them, they have decades of experience helping Western companies to break into their markets. They're obviously deeply embedded in the local cultures, and they understand them in and out. And they've prepared a little bit of a presentation for you today. Each and every one of them will tackle a couple of topics that they feel are really important, and they see day to day that their clients really appreciate being coached on as they go, as they try to enter those markets. And we're also going to have a little bit of a conversation towards the end, a bit of a panel discussion plus Q&A. So everybody here present will have a chance to ask their questions. Please use the Q&A option in the Teams webinars platform. You should be able to find it relatively easily. My colleague Tom will be scanning these questions and then funneling them to us towards the end of this session. We've budgeted about 60 minutes. We might go a little bit under, a little bit over. We'll see how it goes. But yeah, so let's enjoy. And without further, I'm Michael, by the way. I'll be your host and moderator today. And yeah, without further ado, let's invite our first presenter today, Nare Kim from our Seoul office. Nare?
Hello, good morning. Good afternoon. Thank you for a wonderful introduction, Michael. So let me begin. So thank you for having me today. It's a pleasure to be here, and I'm excited to explore a topic critical for businesses seeking to broaden their horizons, especially entering the Korean market. So with over a decade of experience working with innovative tech scale-ups, I have witnessed unique challenges and opportunities that come with international market entry. So today I would like to talk about the Korean business landscape, and also I would like to share my personal and practical tips for you guys. Okay, so let me begin. But before I kick off, I would like to mention one thing. It is critical to acknowledge that this culture depends on context and individuals. So while understanding cultural dynamics is crucial and important, it is equally important to perceive it as just one pillar among various reference points. So if you have any questions later after my presentation, please let me know. And let me begin. So I would like to first compare views held by Korean managers and UK managers in terms of an efficient employee at work. So Korean managers think an efficient employee obeys instructions really well. So Korean managers highly value adherence to instructions. So you can imagine a junior employee strictly following the advice and instructions of a senior manager showing a commitment to hierarchy. But on the other hand, UK managers think an efficient employee demonstrates independence and innovation. So imagine an employee taking the initiative to explore new ideas and approach a problem with fresh perspective. So this is obedience versus independence. And the number two is Korean efficient employee values greater interest. So willingness to compromise personal judgment for the greater interest aligns with the group-oriented culture. So you can imagine a Korean employee setting aside personal opinions over a team during the team discussion to maintain a group cohesion. But on the other hand, efficiency in the UK, it means is linked to active participation in discussions. So UK managers appreciate employee who not only follows instructions but also contributes actively to teams discussions. So, and then also they value decisiveness as well, rather than someone who follows group decision all the time. And then number three is, in Korea, making less mistakes means competence as well. So we always value speed and precision. So an efficient Korean employee works swiftly and meticulously to minimize errors. But in the UK, efficiency in the UK is associated with strong expertise. So manager views an employee as an efficient if they demonstrate deep understanding of their role, industry, and that if they contribute to the team's overall success. This is a quite different culture between the UK and Korea. And then let's delve into specific cultural aspects influencing the workplace. So number two is the respect for authority and obedience of seniors is very important in Korea because we are hugely influenced by Confucianism. So we emphasize hierarchy and respect for age and status. For example, you will find the junior people in the business meeting, they really don't talk during the meeting. That doesn't mean they don't know anything, but they just value the seniors speaking and their opinions in front of everyone. And number two is group-oriented culture. Previously, I explained this. So because we really have a strong emphasis on social harmony and prioritizing the group over individual interest, 눈치, for example, this is a Korean word, the ability to sense others' feeling is very crucial because you need to think about what group think. So for example, at lunch, Korean employees tend to choose the lunch menu as your seniors because they don't want to bother seniors and they have 눈치. They read what seniors choose and they just follow the decision. This is the kind of Korean culture, I would say. And then another one is 빨리빨리 culture. I can explain Korean culture without 빨리빨리. 빨리빨리 is a Korean word which means hurry up or quickly. So our culture is because after the Korean War, we need to restore and overcome our poverty and the challenging times. So we needed to really rapidly work and with speed. So that was very rooted in our Korean work gene. And then also we need to, as I said, we really don't accept mistakes because it delays time. So we don't want to make mistakes, for example, and then sharing mistakes means failure in Korea. So I can share one example. So one British company, UK company discussed with a Korean company for many days whether they could create a risk register or not. So risk register means, in the process of, joint collaboration, you need to list up all the risks so that you can prevent the bigger problems. So UK company, the British company prefers sharing issues to prevent, from becoming a bigger problems. But Korean companies hated it because they would prefer to solve the problems before bringing to their seniors, because that means something is falling, something is missing, which means it's a lack of competency in Korea. So we really don't like to share our mistakes with others. So then what should we do? The next slide, please. What shall we do then? So really easy but important practical tips I can give it to you. No, only 4 things. Number 1, matching the positions of the meeting attendees is important because, as I said, hierarchy is very important in Korea. So when you send someone to Korea, to Korean business meeting, it's important to really align the positions of attendees. So if you send some junior person to the meeting with Korean seniors, they think, oh, this UK company, British company is ignoring me, or they really don't consider this as important. So that kind of messages can be conveyed to a Korean company. So number 2 is talk to your counterpart who can share their issues more honestly rather than escalate to their seniors. Because as I said, they really don't talk during the meeting. So it's important to have someone who can share the issues honestly after the meeting or before the meeting, rather than sharing in front of their seniors, and they will really be kind to you, and then they'll be more open to you. And number 3 is catch what decision maker thinks and says. There will be lively discussion maybe in the meeting, and then you think, oh, this was a very practical, very productive meeting. But if the decision maker from the Korean side was skeptical a little bit, that's almost a decision. So you need to really decode what he or she says or behaves. And number 4, this is maybe I would say one of the most important factors to make success in Korean business. So invest in relationship. Always relationship works really well in Korea. So once you have build good relationship, they will be more open and they'll be more generous to you. Please invest your energy, time in meetings and making relationships. That is what I can give it to you to navigate the Korean market successfully. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Nare. Very interesting stuff. I think, requiring your people to be both really fast and also make no mistakes is setting the bar very high, I think. But looking at Korea's success, seems like it's working, right? So it sounds like companies trying to get into this market definitely need to make sure that they try to match that as well, right? Try to work quick and try to make as few mistakes as possible. Otherwise, they won't be seen as worthy partners by their Korean counterparts. Really great. Thank you so much. So we'll get back to you a little bit later. I have lots of questions. I'm sure our listeners do as well. We'll bring you back towards the end. But at this point, let's fly from Seoul to Tokyo, Japan. And we're going to have our colleague, Nicholas, tell us a little bit about the important things to keep in mind when you're trying to enter the Japanese market. Nicholas, over to you.
Perfect. Thanks, Michael. Can you hear me okay?
Yes, we can.
Perfect. All right. Thank you very much for the time today. So my name is Nicholas. I've been living in Japan for about 10 years, close to 11 years now. And working across a wide spectrum of verticals, and have had the chance to interact with very cutting-edge Western startups and overseas startups that want to come to the Japanese market and link those interesting value propositions and technologies to Japanese conglomerates and big companies, businesses. So with that background, I'll like to talk a bit about how the Japanese companies and especially the big companies that are world known, how are they structured, and especially how were they structured and how that might reflect today, and how that might affect the approach that you should take to the Japanese market when you are thinking about coming and doing business here. So we'll start from the mid 1800s, and you might actually notice some of these big names here. This era was called in Japan the Meiji era. It's also the pre-war era. And that's when Japan started to go through a major industrialization and the first wave of high economic growth. And driving these trends were these big companies that were called zaibatsu. And zaibatsu literally stands for financial clique or clan. So technically, it just means a wealthy clan or family business. And there were a number of these zaibatsus back in the day, but the big four, so to say, were the Sumitomo Group, Mitsubishi Group, Mitsui Group, and Yasuda Group. And out of these, especially Mitsubishi and Sumitomo are still very well known overseas. How the zaibatsus they formed, they would have a family on top of the system. It was sort of a pyramid structure, and what was very usual for the zaibatsus was that they were very vertical organizations. So they would have a family structure at the top that is owning the holding company, and under the holding company, as you can see, there would be a number of different industrial subsidiaries. And they had a major societal influence. As I said, they were boosting the industrialization and the economic growth of the back in the day Japanese market. And I think in current view, they would be viewed as monopolies. Nonetheless, this is how they were structured in the beginning, and they have somewhat remained their structure even though there have been a lot of societal changes throughout the years. So let's move on to the next slide. So the war obviously happened. Japan came out of the war, and there were a number of changes to the society after the Second World War. And one of those changes was the change of the corporate structure within the Japanese domestic and, in the future, global economy. And one of the things that needed changing and was deemed as non-democratic and not very good for the sort of open business style was the existence of zaibatsus. They were viewed to have too much influence in the market, and they needed to be dissolved. And what that led to was to a new structure of companies called keiretsu. And keiretsu, it means management and line. So going from what used to be a vertical structure, now we went to a more horizontal structure. And what is very, very normal for the keiretsu structures is that they are arranged around big Japanese banks, and under the banks there will be a number of group companies that are having cross shareholdings. And again, you can see that there are some old familiar names here: the Sumitomo Group, Mitsubishi Group, Mitsui Group, still continue to exist, just with the slightly different structure. And then some new ones came in, a bit more, not as widely across different sectors, but more sector-specific big companies like Toyota and Nissan. And interestingly, Toyota and Nissan then would be considered more vertical keiretsus. So they have somewhat of the similar structure as a zaibatsu might have, but how they do corporate governance and how they structure themselves obviously is different. And as you can see, so here, let's take, for example, the Mitsubishi Group as an example. So that you might have an OEM that is making either cars or home electronics, but under that, in the keiretsu system, there will be a number of tiered companies. So there might be a tier 1 that provides directly to the OEM that is making the Mitsubishi car, and then there might be a tier 2 that is providing to the tier 1, and it might go all the way down to tier 3, tier 4, and they're all interconnected and sort of feeding into the large OEM, and that's how they are structured. And in case of Toyota, obviously the OEM is making the cars, and then under that there would be big tier 1s like Denso or Aishin, and under that tiered companies will go under the big Toyota group. And why all of this is important, we can move on to the next slide. it's very important to understand how these big Japanese conglomerates and groups are formed, because when you are entering the Japanese market, you want to consider who exactly should you be targeting. A lot of these companies, they work closely together. So we can take Toyota, for example. From the first thought, you might think that, okay, I should be talking to the big OEM that makes the final decisions, but actually that's not necessarily the best way to the market. Depending on what your product is, it might be more beneficial for you to talk to a tier one like Denso or Aishin, or it might be even further down the supply chain in the tier 2 or tier 3, because that's where the key decisions are made, and they are just then fed up through the supply chain up to the OEM. Another example of this might be if you're talking similarly, as we mentioned in the previous slide, with the Mitsubishi Group company, and you want to go to the home electronics, for example. If there's a smart fridge that you want to put your solution into, it might not be the best to go directly after the OEM. You might have to go to either the group system integrator that works with the OEM, or you might need to go through a parts manufacturer or a software provider that belongs to the same group. And how these often tie together is that you, at the end, before a decision is made, there might be a few different teams from different group companies coming together and making the final decision. So oftentimes it's not enough to just talk to one of the group companies. It's a team decision. How this also reflects on how the employees within these organizations move, especially on the top level. There's often management movements between one group company to the other, and they work very, very closely together. So that is why it's key to understand who you're targeting, what their corporate and the group structure looks like, how are the group companies connected, and who works with who and in what way, and in that way start mapping out in which company who makes what decisions and who should be in the final table to make a decision on when it comes to deploying your technology or solution in the market. Yep, I'm happy to take any questions. Obviously, it's can be either fairly simple or very complicated depending on the solution that we're talking about. But happy to take any questions at the end. Maybe talk a bit more about a few success stories, because as I mentioned just now, there's often a few key players around the same table from different companies when we are making decisions. But yeah, I think I'll wrap it up for now here. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Nicholas. I think really fascinating. Thank you for that history lesson. I think that's something that we very often forget. We think that, business culture exists right now, but actually mostly it has very deep roots in things that happened in the past. So knowing a little bit about that, even if just to impress your counterparts and tell them, I've been quite interested in the history of your company. I know you guys have been around for 400 years, which is something that I learned recently at a Sumitomo event that we had in London last week, that this company dates back to the 1600s, which is incredible. Thank you very much, Nicholas. Again, a lot of burning questions, but we'll leave them for a few more minutes because we have 2 more presentations to go. Speaking of which, the next up is Singapore and our sort of Southeast Asian presence, which we often define Korea, Japan, and Taiwan, which will come a little bit later, as sort of Northeast Asia. Singapore is a little bit more on the Southeast side of things. So I expect some differences here. And for that, we have Nicole. Nicole, are you there and ready to go?
Yep, ready to go.
Perfect.
Thank you. So, hi everyone, I'm Nicole. I'm based in Singapore and have been working with tech companies expanding to Singapore and, as Michael said, the Southeast Asia region for the past 5 years. And today I'm going to share some commonly experienced cultural nuances as well as some pointers you can take note when you expand your business here. Singapore business culture is an intersection of diversity, meritocracy, efficiency, as well as relationship. As a key regional hub, Singapore is indeed very open and has a pro-business environment. Singapore can also serve as your gateway to Southeast Asia, the world's 5th largest economy, which is also one of the most economically and culturally diverse regions globally. First, I'll be sharing 3 big factors you should keep in mind as you strategize your expansion here to Singapore, after which some general notes that you should take note when you come to Singapore. The very first one being cultural significance. There is diversity in this unity you see here in Singapore. Singapore is unlike those of homogeneous culture. It is a multicultural and multilingual society where English is the primary language for business, but we often switch seamlessly between English, Mandarin, Malay, and Tamil, more commonly known as Singlish, which also reflects the cultural diversity here we have in Singapore. And understanding and navigating this rich diversity is important for businesses entering the market. While Singapore embraces efficiency and direct communication, the Asian value of saving face or preserving dignity and avoiding public embarrassment plays a significant role in business interaction. This influences our communication styles with indirect expressions and nonverbal cues, often carrying meaning. Just because someone is nodding or seeming to be agreeing, do not assume a deal is going to happen. The notion of face is an essential part of business culture in this region. Locals do not tend to show their opinions openly or to share their opinions openly. So pay attention to body languages and read between the lines. Even within really small little Singapore, there are vastly different business culture across different sectors and industry. For example, engaging with NMCs and industries heavily influenced by Western cultures often mirrors the global business norms, which you are probably used to. However, this could be very different when you're engaging with traditional family businesses or the Asian conglomerates, where it is highly relationship and hierarchy focused. So I always recommend my clients to do a background check and strategize before going into any of these first meetings. The next thing you should know about Singapore's business landscape is that it's built on meritocracy and efficiency. Regardless of background, individuals are assessed based on their abilities and accomplishments, which also means if you have a good product or solution, you definitely have a chance here in Singapore. Next, efficiency. Time is of the essence. Efficiency is ingrained in Singapore's business DNA. Timeliness, punctuality, and commitment to excellence are highly valued. And efficiency is not merely about processes, it's about the results. It's always about the results, right? For example, in Singapore, you can register your company in just 15 minutes and set up business here in just 2 steps within 1 to 2 working days. So keeping that in mind, you must always be prepared to demonstrate your value quickly and operate efficiently. And the last one, the one thing you almost definitely see if you're here in Singapore is a kiasu spirit, which is the fear of losing or missing opportunities. Hence the always rather competitive nature and environment here in Singapore. In the face of competition, the kiasu spirit drives strategic decision-making to stay ahead of competition and the readiness to seize opportunities swiftly. Singaporean businesses often prioritize being well-prepared, leveraging data and market insights to stay ahead. So if your product or solution can let these companies have an edge over their competitors, definitely leverage on this spirit, because we are always afraid of losing out. That's all for the 3 main factors to put into consideration while we expand to Singapore. Next, I'll be sharing 5 general things you should take note of as you navigate the Singapore business landscape. The very first one, as my colleagues have shared, is hierarchy. It's a really big culture here in Asia, and it is quite similar in Singapore as well. There is a strong emphasis on hierarchy and seniority, especially so in traditional family businesses or Asian conglomerates. Decision-making processes may involve consultation with top leadership. So the top tip for you is to always engage with the middle or senior management, as well as understanding the organization's hierarchical structure. So you know who you should be convincing to close the deal and who could be your champion. Because of this, sales cycle can also take time, so be prepared for longer sales cycle and be patient. The next thing about buyers here in Singapore and Southeast Asia generally, we are often quite risk adverse. Typically, we need a more careful and calculated approach to risk management, meaning that people are less likely to take risks without comprehensive evaluation of potential challenges and opportunities. I would always advise companies to go into meetings prepared with a robust plan, incorporating data-driven insights to support the potential risks that the client may face, to increase your chances and to also build trust in this relationship. The next one being budget cycles is typically more strict here in this region, so allow for the budget cycle to run their course before they become available. Next, communication tools. Email is still a staple here, same with the Western business setting. However, we often also use a WhatsApp of emails because of the immediacy that this platform offers. Often we see a much higher and faster response rate with WhatsApp as compared to email. So if you have been trying to set up a meeting, which you have met with someone over a networking session and they haven't been responding, try WhatsApp. I'm quite sure that's going to work. And the last one being relationship building. It's a region that is heavily relationship oriented. Building personal relationship often over meals is a common practice. And informal meetings are often not more important than signing the contract. It is when you kind of read between the lines and try to get some idea on what your client's thinking and what decision they are leaning towards. One fun fact before I wrap up my presentation today is whenever I have a client visit, more often than not, by the end of the day, they will be always too full for even dinner. So be prepared to be really well fed when you're here in Singapore. That is all from me. If you have any further questions, please feel free to put them in the Q&A session, and I'll be more than happy to answer them later. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Nicole. That was really enlightening. And one of the sort of patterns that I see emerging at this point is that business cultures and cultures in general, they're not always rational, right? They're not always perfectly logical, right? Because we've seen already people talk about, efficiency is really, really important. But at the same time, we're very risk averse, right? Which will kind of stop us in our tracks at some point. Meritocracy, right? Like let the best tech, let the best company win is on one hand really highly valued. On the other hand, you got to build those relationships, right? So I think, while certain things become clearer and clearer as we go, other things you start noticing that actually it's a spectrum, it's a balance, right? Of nothing is black and white. Anyway, just a little thought that I had. You can probably delve a little bit deeper into this later on. But thank you again, Nicole. And now, last but not least, we're going to go to our colleague Sam in Taiwan. Sam, over to you.
Thank you very much, Michael, for the introduction, and thank you everybody for staying with us. And I'm Sam. I've lived in Taiwan for over 20 years. I've also spent a lot of time in the UK. So I think I have that unique experience of being able to observe and comment on the cultural peculiarities of doing business in both places. I've been helping Intralink clients pursue business opportunities in Taiwan, and invariably a lot of those business meetings always involve having a meal together, whether it's lunch or dinner. So I thought I would today talk a little bit about this and help you guide your behavior at these occasions. But the first thing I want to say also, I think some of my colleagues already mentioned that as well, and that is, in order to build relationships, having a meal together, eating together is an essential aspect of that. And this is the reason why the Taiwanese really love to have, lunch or dinner with their Western clients. And it is important, and you should think of it as an extension of even the business meeting. Although you've concluded your main discussions at an informal setting, sitting down for a meal, it's a good occasion for both parties to understand each other a little bit better and to discuss maybe not necessarily the business aspects of their relationship, but to get a better understanding of the values and what people are like outside of a straightforward formal business setting. So we have the next slide, please. So, think of it as an occasion to continue the relationship, to introduce each other, and obviously as an occasion to build trust, to show mutual respect for each other, and also enforce that relationship through having a meal together. This is the underlying key message I think I want to pass across to you. This applies not only in Taiwan, but also throughout cultures in Asia, although there might be subtle differences. Yeah, so next slide, please. So there are a few key rules with dining etiquette. Just as you respect your host by being on time or even arriving a little bit early, you should do the same for your business meal, whether it's lunch or dinner. And again, because you're showing respect to their authority, follow their examples. If you're not sure where you should be sat, ask them. If you don't, when you come into a big dining place with perhaps potentially lots of tables, you're not sure where you're supposed to be sat at, wait for guidance, or if that isn't forthcoming, ask them about it. If in a perfectly arranged setting, you should be arriving at your table, you'll be taken to your seat, or you would be able to seat placement cards with your name on it. So that is obvious where you should go. But if that isn't there, then obviously, wait for the prompts, or if it isn't forthcoming, ask for it. Don't think that it's rude to ask for essential information like where you should be sat. And then another thing about obviously dining in Asia is that we use chopsticks, and I think most people in the West now are quite familiar and comfortable using chopsticks, although some may struggle with advanced skills such as picking up a peanut. Even I sometimes struggle depending on what the chopstick is made of. It can be a challenge. If you're not comfortable using chopsticks in these business dinner settings, I don't think it's a bad idea to ask for traditional Western cutlery. I once had a client that asked me about this, and I asked a few questions to try to ascertain how comfortable they were with using chopsticks. And in the end, I think the risk was that if you do a few things you shouldn't do with your chopsticks, it can be considered rude in Taiwan and also in China, I believe, and also the rest of Asia. So if you're not comfortable, I advise them to just stick with or ask for cutlery. In that way, you feel much more natural during the entire meal. You won't make any mistakes. There won't be any embarrassment with dropping chopsticks or crossing them, or not being able to pick up certain things and having to resort to stabbing with your chopsticks. All of those things you should never do anyway, I'm sure you all know. But if you're not comfortable with your chopstick skills, then ask for cutlery so you don't place yourself in that burden. And finally, because the meal itself would have several courses, always try to pace yourself, and it's like running a marathon, really. So don't gorge yourself on the first couple of courses and then not have enough space for the dessert and the other courses too, because not sampling all of the courses can be seen as disrespectful, and you're missing out, you're refusing offers of food. So always pace yourself if you can. Next slide, please. So this is a slide I'm putting there. I mean, on the surface, it looks quite appetizing, just random food around. But there is a reason why I put these some of these pictures here. So there's an item on the top right, which is a Chinese cabbage dish, and then an item on the top left, which is a braised pork dish. I picked those two out in particular because for some reason, if you go to the National Palace Museum in Taiwan, which is essentially a collection of the most prized Chinese artifacts from 3,000 years of history. Those two items actually stand out as the items that represent Chinese civilization. The one on the top right is a jadeite cabbage jewelry. It looks like a carving, and it looks just like that dish being served there, although it's a single cabbage, and it is a well-known and recognized artifact that represents Chinese civilization throughout the world. And the second most famous item, again, is food related, is the braised pork on the top left. It's a piece of rock that naturally looks like a piece of braised pork, but it's been painted strategically so that it actually looks so lifelike, like a very tasty piece of pork morsel. The other items you can find in everyday dining in Taiwan is the beef noodle soup in the middle on the top left, and then obviously the bubble tea on the bottom left. Tofu, if you're vegetarian, tofu is widely available, and also snacks or savory items like the pancakes on the bottom right there. So moving on, please. So we've recognized that we've mentioned that treat the business meal as an extension of your meeting, and your host is arranging this meal for your enjoyment, also as a symbol of mutual respect. So your host is showing hospitality about the wide variety and range of different foods available, which you may not have experienced wherever you come from. I know that in the UK there are some Taiwanese restaurants there, Din Tai Fung being one, but it's probably unlikely you would be able to enjoy these dishes again when you return to the UK. And that is what your host is trying to emphasize, is trying to provide for you a unique experience that you can only sample whilst in Taiwan. It shows that you're being valued, that you're important, and there are additional details such as, not only how good the food tastes, but also how well it's presented as well. Tiny little things that shows you your host really cares about presenting the best that Taiwan has to offer. And this is a metaphor for what they hope to achieve with your business relationship too. So, the little attention to detail, going the extra mile, making sure you're happy, and so on. These are all the expectations that they want to fulfill for you, and in a way they would hopefully like to have that reciprocated too. So don't be too passive in the meal. So if you're offered food and drink, if people pick up with there's usually a set of public chopsticks too, particularly after hygiene issues after COVID. If they pick up food for you using the public set of chopsticks, don't always be passive. You can also do the same for your hosts even. If you're always being poured with tea and beer when your glass is empty or your cup is empty, reciprocate the favor as well to your hosts, to the people that you naturally engage with at the same level and so on. So, don't always be passive, and try to be more natural, more lively as well, but always reciprocate the favor. That's the most important message. And this is the metaphor for reciprocating the business relationship too. So that's really it today. I don't want to talk too much more about the underlining messages that your hosts are trying to get across. It is an occasion to have fun. It is an occasion to enjoy yourself, to enjoy the food, but be mindful of your behavior. Think of it as an extension of the business meeting. Just be yourself, but be respectful of certain expected behavior at a meal. So that's really my presentation for today. Happy to take questions.
Thank you, Sam. Thank you for making us really hungry. I think I'm gonna book a table at Din Tai Fung after this, because I can't miss that. Really good. I mean, amazing that we all like food, right? It doesn't matter if you're in Asia, in Europe, or America, or whatever. But it sounds like in Taiwan it really runs deep. Seeing that there are artifacts in museums in shape of food dating back 3,000 years and so on. Really amazing stuff. So we're going to go into the final part of this session today. So our Q&A. I will stop sharing my screen in a second, and I would like to ask our three speakers to turn their cameras back on, turn your mics on. I'll start with a few questions from my side that I've been just kind of jotting down as we were going through your stuff. And then obviously we'll have some questions as well in the Q&A session from the audience. All right, guys. So thanks again. Really fascinating stuff. I think that there are some through lines that we've seen through, most of your presentations. Like, for example, the importance of relationship building, right? I think perhaps, Nicholas, you didn't talk too much about this because, your angle was a little bit different. But would you say that relationship building in Japan is, also quite as important as it is in Singapore, Korea, and Taiwan?
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's knowing who you're dealing with, and then also getting to know them on a more personal level that helps to develop your business relationships and endeavors in the market. So I'd say so. It's oftentimes here seen as well that you might go to have maybe not after the first meeting, but after you've met somebody a few times, you might go grab lunch or have some dinner if we're getting closer to a deal. So yes, I'd say it's similar here.
Very interesting. Yeah, I would have expected that because Japanese food is also famously quite delicious, and sharing a meal in Japan probably is also a point on the map, on your roadmap to closing a deal. Very interesting. And Nicholas, staying with you, you talked about the corporate structures and governance and things like that in Japan, and how it affects how you should be thinking about entering the market today. I wanted to ask Nare and Sam, and actually Nicole as well, in your countries, in your territories, does this also kind of resemble a little bit the Japanese model? Is it completely different? Maybe Nare, you could start.
Okay, maybe I can go first. Thank you for the question. Yes, very similar. We have a word called chaebol, which have a significant impact on the South Korean economy. So you can think about the name Samsung, LG, Hyundai. Those are all chaebols who have all the economic power in the society. And for example, SK Group, SK is one of conglomerates, chaebol in Korea, and they operate almost 200 subsidiaries across the energy, life science, semiconductors, advanced materials, and even fashion.
Right.
Yeah.
Very interesting. Sam, what about Taiwanese companies? Do they also, have these huge umbrella companies that they work on, or are they relatively more independent individually?
We don't have such a continuous industrial history. So I think Taiwanese industries was influenced very much by what happened after 1949, when, end of the Second World War, end of the Chinese Civil War, and a group of people came to Taiwan from China. A lot of these people, they founded industries, some of which are state monopolies. So these companies still exist. You'll probably see them. They'll have names like China Petroleum, and then we added of Taiwan now recently, so we don't confuse people. And China Airlines, which is also a Taiwanese national carrier for the airline industry and so on. So there's a little bit of that about. And then maybe more recently, there's some local financial groups that have sort of become like conglomerates, but they're not so condensed like Japan and Korea. We hear some names like Shinkong Group, Fubon Group. They're very much into things like commercial retail, hotels, healthcare, and financial services industries. Yeah, so we have some of those groups, but they're not as concentrated as Japan and Korea.
Got it. Thank you, Sam. And Nicole, anything to add from the Singapore, Southeast Asia perspective to this conversation?
I'd say we are more similar to Taiwan than Korea or Japan. But on that note, Singapore is really young. We are 58 this year, so doesn't run that deep, so it's not as branched out yet.
Got it. So I guess, you know, it's possible that these bigger groups will sort of consolidate and form in the future. Whether it's a good thing or not, that remains to be seen, I suppose. Okay, all right. Thank you very much, guys. I think going back to Nicholas for a second. So you mentioned, Nicholas, in your presentation that, you know, it's not just a window dressing, right? These kinds of relationships, internal relationships between these, you know, industrial groups are quite important, quite meaningful. The path to making a deal with them can be very different. I mean, do you have any examples from, you know, working with your clients on how you kind of handled this and what the results were?
Yeah, there are a few examples. So let's say in the automotive industry, as an example. So a lot of our clients, they would like to go after the big companies in the market. So Toyota as maybe the primary example. So ultimately, the goal would be to get for a client that was providing autonomous driving solutions. More specifically, was to develop algorithms for the perception that is used in the ADAS systems. So they wanted to get to Toyota. However, in the process of discussing with Toyota, it became quite clear that the OEM itself, while they have a team in-house, that team works very closely with teams within Denso, that's a tier 1 company, that then works closely with teams at a company called Mirais Technologies that is very focused on sort of cutting edge semiconductor R&D and research. So ultimately, when we were talking with Toyota, teams from Denso and Mirais were brought in, and there were some discussions around a potential POC. A POC was done, and at one point there was also some teams coming in from Woven, currently known as Woven by Toyota, another R&D organization. So you can see how from all these different, ultimately 4 companies, there were teams working together to see if it's a good match ultimately for the big OEM, and that was one of the projects recently that we did.
Interesting. It almost seems like, you know, making a multiple angle approach is probably a good place to start, right? To understand the structure first, as you set off, see how the companies are interconnected, and then actually talk to some of them and see, you know, where this all kind of converges, where the deal is actually being made. Wouldn't you agree?
Yeah, I think so. And there's no one right way or wrong way to do it. I think in this case, we could have gone after, let's say, Denso first or Toyota first. And ultimately, if you talk to the right people within that organization, they will tie in and loop in people from the other organizations then. Yeah. So it's more about understanding who you should be talking also within each organization level. But yeah, it was interesting to see how they really brought in people from different teams.
Yeah, very interesting. Thank you, Nicholas, for that. So just going back to a little bit about, I think, Nare, you mentioned that, you know, it's quite important to read your room, right? To see what the decision maker is not only saying, but also doing and showing with his body language. I think it's fair to say that it's true in all of the territories that we're discussing today. Like kind of understanding, trying to read between the lines a little bit, because, well, people tend to be polite in meetings, right? They're not going to tell you to go away. They're going to tell probably, you know, oh, you know, we'll look into this. But sometimes that we'll look into this kind of means no. So with that being said, I mean, do you guys have any sort of interesting examples of, you know, your clients or maybe yourselves, you know, in your career, maybe early in your career, misreading the room and kind of making a bit of a mistake? I don't know, Sam, maybe something like that comes to your mind.
Yeah, I would say, you know, I think particularly with my talk, when you've had a negotiation in perhaps in the office, it'd be a bit formal, but then you extend that into a meal setting at a restaurant. I think people are more freely would talk and open up about what they really think. And actually, I know some Taiwanese company CEOs that prefer negotiating at the meal table, particularly after a very satisfying meal, because they realize that's when you know, you've eaten, you're very happy, and you've let your guard down. Some of the questions or the deals he was trying to pursue earlier in the office perhaps wouldn't get a look in, but now is the perfect opportunity to ask it. So be aware of that as well. I think it's much more effective than plying somebody with lots of drinks, for example.
Nicole, what about you? Anything that people should pay very specific attention in the room, whether it's the meeting room or the dinner thereafter?
I would agree with Sam that typically after a meal, people tend to loosen up a bit, and that's when they kind of start speaking about why certain things are not going certain ways. So that's always a good indication on how you can navigate your pitch in the next time around, so that when you go and pitch to the right person, and the champion would be helping you in this process, because you kind of have started to build a relationship over a meal.
Very, very interesting. Thank you very much, Nicole. So actually, some of these questions already that came through were actually asked by the audience, but there's a couple of specific ones from the audience as well to our specific speakers. So this one is for you, Nare. It's from Alex from, I actually don't know which company, but we'll check that later. So Alex is asking that they're actually negotiating a contract currently in Korea in a remote fashion. And they're asking what are the expectations from their Korean counterparts that they're negotiating with in terms of, like, is it okay to chase them over email to ask for, hey, where's that answer that you promised, or that should they kind of let the natural flow of the negotiation kind of take its place? What would be your advice?
Maybe I can relate to my speech, my previous speech. There are many people engaged in the negotiation, I'm sure. So you cannot really chase the same person every day. Then they will too much, right? As you can imagine. But there will be many stakeholders engaged in the same negotiation. So try to build a relationship with someone nicer among those, and then you can really chase different person, someone nicer to other people. Because if you just chase the same person, it'll be too much. So, but and then also at the same time, chasing people is not really a bad thing in Korea. So until the things get done, you can just ask them again. It doesn't mean rude, as long as it's in a polite way. So it's okay to chase them, but not the same person at the same time. But try to navigate other people. You can really people who can be nicer to you. That would be my advice. And then you can reach out to me as well after the event, after this talk. Maybe I can give you more tips as well if you want to talk to me separately.
Excellent. Thank you very much, Nare. And I guess we have time for one last question. So someone asked that there is a perception, obviously not on this call because your guys' English is amazing, right? But there's a perception that sometimes big Asian companies, people kind of struggle with communicating in English. What would you say is the case in your respective territories? Is that really a problem, or kind of not anymore? Maybe we can start from Nicholas.
I think it goes case by case, but on a general level, I'd say, especially if you want to do business in Japan locally, so let's say not Toyota in the States, but Toyota in Japan, it's hugely beneficial if you are able to speak the local language. Because even if the counterparty here is able to speak English, there are some cultural aspects that you're not able to pick up from the language. Whereas if they are talking in Japanese, you can understand a bit more about what they might be leaving out, but from the context. So I think the short answer is yes, it is hugely beneficial if you want to be successful in the market to have somebody who speaks the local language.
Understood. Nicole, how about Singapore?
I would say English will work perfectly fine here in Singapore.
Yeah.
There is no local language anyway, because everyone speaks different languages, multicultural and multilingual. So English works well here.
Got it. That's kind of what I expected. Sam, what's the situation in Taiwan?
Taiwan's a bit mixed. So I think, I think most people speak quite good levels of English, particularly the younger generation. But it's an issue of what you're comfortable with. When you have a high stakes meeting or negotiation, and if you can speak English but you're not 100% fluent, perhaps you want to fall back on, Mandarin again, as we speak in Taiwan, or southern Taiwan, they speak Taiwanese, which is a local dialect of a Chinese local dialect. So whatever people will feel comfortable doing, that will happen, I think. I even had a company in Taiwan that insists on signing NDAs in traditional Chinese because they don't like seeing legalese or English, legal English. And, they can get a lawyer, but they don't really want to do that. They want to understand it themselves. So that can happen as well. So I think Taiwan's a little bit mixed.
Got it. Very interesting. Nare, how about Korea?
Yeah, our case is very similar to Japan, I would say, as you maybe already imagined. So, we work with tech scale-ups mostly. So we talk to R&D teams a lot. So engineers, they speak language called engineering technology. So they have a terminology. They understand almost everything, almost maybe 90% of what your company is saying or what you're saying. But still, they are very reluctant to say something in English because they're worried if they make mistakes. We really hate making mistakes, as I said. And we don't want to feel awkward by pronouncing something really in a weird way. So we don't want to say something in English, but we understand. They understand what you're speaking.
Amazing. Yeah, I love that. The language of engineering. It's a whole different beast. And I think I saw Nicholas kind of nodding and smiling, and Sam the same. So I think it's also a common occurrence across the region that once the engineers get in the room, doesn't matter where they are from, they can probably communicate pretty okay. All right, guys, that was fantastic. Thank you so much. I have one more slide just as a wrap up for everybody, but that's our session today. Thank you very much for your time. Really interesting stuff. I'm sure that people will be able to find you on LinkedIn and maybe send you some direct messages and see if they have any additional questions to you. Now, let me just share my screen for a final second to finalize the housekeeping for today. So this amazing workshop was a part of the UK-APAC Tech Growth Programme that we're running in partnership with the Department for Business and Trade and a few others. So thank you very much to the UK government for sponsoring it. There's a lot more that this program has to offer. So a link to our website here. You can go there, you can find out about different programs, you can find out about upcoming workshops, you can find out about past workshops. And this workshop will also be available on that website soon to watch on demand, to rewatch if you need to. So thank you again to everybody. Thank you to those who tuned in. Thank you to our speakers. A lovely time together, and we hope to see you again soon. Take care.